Jim, this question for the late night drive-thru comes from Ian in Canada. I've been a longtime fan since you debuted with the WWF, and I've always been entertained either from your antics as a manager or your legendary rants on Shitstain and that Bucky Beaver-looking motherfucker.
I did have, also, I had good antics. I was always a good antic guy.
Anywho, he wrote that, anywho, on to my question, and I apologize if this has already been asked. But what was the backstage in WWF like when Hulk Hogan initially turned heel in WCW? I remember how huge it was when I was a kid, and I was a former Hulkamaniac.
I mean, it wasn't. I guess we were surprised. I guess that that somebody finally talked Hogan into turning heel. That was about it. I mean, it was a big deal from a business standpoint. Obviously, we recognized that it was a new coat of paint on an icon that hadn't drawn worth of shit. That's why he was down there, because Vince let him go to begin with, and in the past few years before that. But that was going to be a new coat of paint and a new universe for him to live in, and it did freshen him up. But it wasn't like a jaw-dropping shock. Oh my God, Hogan's turned heel! Like, help me try to describe this.
Well, where did you watch it? Where did you actually see the heel turn at the pay-per-view where he joined the NWO, formed the NWO with Nash and Hall? Where did you see it?
Well, it would have been, and what was the date on that again?
It would have been summer of '96.
Okay, I was in Stamford or in Connecticut, and the only way because I was not buying their pay-per-views, believe me. Because Tommy Noe at the time from Knoxville, or Morristown, actually, our old Smoky Mountain Wrestling ring announcer, got the pay-per-views and would send me VHS tapes within a week or two. So I wasn't going to pay $50 where I could watch it in a week or two. So probably the first time I saw it was when they showed the highlights the next night on Nitro, or if I watched that, which, sometimes I taped it and I'd get around to watch it a few days later. I was not immersed in following the competition, every minute move like some of the guys were and some people were in the WWF at the time, because I was seeing enough wrestling just with the stuff that we were producing. I would watch it eventually, but over the course of the week. So I don't remember the first time I saw it.
I've heard Pat Patterson mention watching things on the WCW pay-per-view at Vince's house with Vince. Did you ever watch a WCW pay-per-view with Vince?
We did not. I was at Vince's house when writing sessions were called for. And otherwise, if I was not at Vince's house, nor did I want to sit and watch. I never saw Vince watch any wrestling. We couldn't even get him to watch tapes most of the time of guys, unless he was at the office. Then he might watch something. But if we were at Vince's house, there was no TV in the room. We were supposed to write, right? So I was never given the option of watching fucking TV around there. But I did show him the first ECW he saw when Bill Alfonso and Francine or whoever was
Beulah.
had that Beulah, that horrible fucking bloodbath. I said, this is the kind of shit you want to, associate with. Anyway.
How did he react to that?
Well, he raised all of his eyebrows, but once again, I'm not trying to knock Paul E., but he was doing a lot of fucking goofy shit that I didn't think people should be associated with in those days. And, but Bruce, to some extent, was an ECW fan, but Russo was a goddamn ECW fanatic. And because it was a wrestling version of the Jerry Springer show, which is what he always aspired the whole thing to be. And I didn't like the way it was going to get people hurt. I didn't like the way that it was immuning people to angles and to things that could be used to draw. And all of a sudden, the guy gets blown up with a goddamn stick of dynamite, but it's only for a 2 count. And, there's people bleeding out of every orifice of their body. And it was too fucking much. It was too much hot shot, which, as we've all found out, I think Lance Storm said it best when he was on the show one time. He said, we broke all the rules in ECW, and then we found out why there were rules.
Back to Hogan. Of course, in '93, he returns to the WWF. They give him the world title at WrestleMania in an impromptu surprise match to end the night. And of course, after that, he goes to New Japan, goes against Muta, talks about how the IWGP title is more important than the WWF title, and then drops the belt to Yokozuna at King of the Ring, where a photographer's flash explodes in his face. And you're in the WWF a short time after that. At that point in the summer of 93, when they're building up Luger, they're trying to build up their next Hogan. What are they saying about Hulk Hogan, who was just there?
Well, and like you said, I came in right after he was gone, but the biggest topic of conversation in the locker room, if there was any, was that, everybody knows he wouldn't put Bret over. He had to put Yokozuna over because he was a big monster that Hogan was always comfortable with. If he was going to lose, he'd lose to a monster like that. He'd get some sympathy, but he couldn't lose to Bret Hart because then he would have just got beat, even though Bret was what would have been best for business at that point in time. But really, most people weren't talking about Hogan because he didn't, in that environment, he wasn't drawing anymore. People forget that. If he was still drawing at that point, he wouldn't have taken time away from the business, and Vince wouldn't have let him go to begin with. But I'm sure he was taking up doing things on his own and getting those outside shots and saying what he wanted to. I don't think it was, exactly heartbreaking to a lot of people that he was gone, so that it would give other people a chance to get over, like Jerry Jarrett always said, he couldn't get anybody over Lawler as long as Lawler was there. Eddie Graham would try to get Dusty out of Florida for a little while so he could get somebody else over. And then they could come back. How can I miss you if you won't go away? But it wasn't a major topic of concern because it's not like business took a huge hit because business was kind of sucking when he was still there.
At the height of the NWO, when WCW is defeating the WWF each Monday in the ratings, and the WWF, from everything we've heard, was in a lot of trouble, did Vince ever say anything about Hogan? I mean, here's his former top star, the guy he built his company around once he went national, and he's working not only for the competition, but a competition that is suddenly defeating him. Did he ever have anything to say about Hogan?
Obviously he was talked about, but it wasn't like he would sit there and go, oh, that fucking Hogan, I can't believe he's done this to me. No, we would talk about what Hogan was doing in the basis of the program or whatever, or he might recall an amusing anecdote, as people say, about something that happened involving Hogan in the past, but it wasn't like he sat there dwelling on him really at all. Almost, because once again, that's wrestling. Hulk Hogan was not going to be worth pretty much anything to the WWF at that point because he'd had the bad publicity. He'd lied on the Arsenio Hall show. He'd going through the steroid trials, whatever. If he just stayed on WWF TV, it would have just gone down and down and down. He needed to get away, which he did. He's always been smart about that. Then he needed a fresh coat of paint and a new location, which I think at first he took WCW's money, probably because they offered him so much. But then I think he probably thought the reason why they talked him into doing a thing is probably ultimately he thought, you know what, after I get over as a heel, then I can switch back babyface and there's my fresh coat of paint, and which it was, because that's what happens. But, you can't resurrect somebody that's dead in the same territory with the same cast of characters to work with. It has to be someplace different with a different look and a whole different bunch of fucking matches. Even if those matches are against a lot of people that they've also hired away from the place you used to be, it still looks different. And that's what gets people back over. That's pretty much the only thing you can do to get people back over.